morning, everybody, and I just have to say I have never been more excited to do some public speaking than I am today, because TRIGG Mining, to take you back to the beginning of our journey, we listed it just on 2 years ago this month. And I'm about to talk to you about a greenfields discovery that has the potential to be a top 10 global producer of sulphate of potash with a long life and low cost project. It's also incredibly sustainable. We're all talking these days about ESG, but back when I was a teenager, embarking on my career in mining, the purpose was always for me about building mines communities can be proud of. And that is the purpose of TRIGG, and that is what this project is very much about. Before I jump into that, I'll encourage you in your own time, because otherwise it'll take up the entire presentation, to look at all the disclaimers. As the gentleman before me said, it is about people. It's incredibly important. If you want to build a project, you need project builders. I am a mining engineer by trade. That is what I love doing the most. And joining me in the last few months is Chief Operating Officer Tony Chamberlain. And with a project like this, which is much more about the chemistry of the brine that we're talking about, he has a PhD in chemistry and has spent the last 2.5 years working in another sulphate of potash project. So we're building up our experience base, and being a second mover in this industry, we can absorb that experience that's being developed. Other things to take away on this slide is the enterprise value. For what I'm about to talk about, please keep that in mind, because to me it is not correlating just yet. And you might also like to observe that we haven't yet attracted the institutional investors. Each one of these people in the top 10 lists that hold about 1/4 of the company, we know them by name. As just about everyone here, I think, is talking about a Tier 1 location, I really think the backyard of Western Australia really is a Tier 1 location. Our nearest neighbour is Gruyere. Our project sits on the Great Central Road. And right now you might know about that if you're a four-wheel driving and outback camping enthusiast, but that road is being turned into the 3rd transnational highway. And by 2027, 2028, the bitumen will continue all the way from Laverton through to Winston in Queensland, opening up new markets. But importantly, for TRIGG, it's taking bitumen right up to our mine gate and providing us with a really sound logistics system for exporting our product. It's also a really large discovery. We have found at the first outset here 14.4 million tonnes and high-grade amount of sulphate of potash. And within that, we have an indicated resource which has underpinned the scoping study of some 4.2 million tonnes. There is a lot of upside yet. That is just the first part of this program, and I'll talk more about that later. And as I said, this is truly sustainable. We are looking for minerals already dissolved in brine. And with that, we don't need to develop an open pit. We don't need to leave a large rock waste dump. We're pumping brine into solar evaporation ponds, harvesting solar energy quite naturally, and then producing a very natural product which can improve the sustainability of global agriculture. That is sustainable mining, and #mining for farmers. So the scoping study has been based on some really sound fundamentals. The spot price there is the exchange rate is the price on the 1st of September of 73 cents. And the SOP price, it isn't a spot market, so it does make it a little bit difficult to assess where we're sitting around cost curves and things like that. But I'll talk a bit more about price and what's going on in the commodity space when it comes to agriculture. That gives us the project has given us a production target of about 245,000 tonnes per annum. That puts us up right next to the BFS nameplate capacity of some of the peers that are in construction at the moment, and even twice the rate of an expansion case of the other company. We are looking at producing that amount of product for at least a mine life of 21 years. That is our starting case. And that is taking 41% of that resource that we've identified. So there is a lot more to come when we start talking about mine life. So what is it going to do sustainably from an economics perspective? Well, a project like this is large and a long mine life, and much more to come. Our C1 cash cost, when I talked about the price before being $550 a tonne, is about US $250 a tonne. So good margins. The EBITDA is almost $100 million a year for that 21 years of life. That gives us a very sound NPV and a payback period of 4.5 years. This puts this project in the top 10 global producers and the lowest cost quartile. So not only is this environmentally sustainable, it's also very economically sustainable. So what would it look like? Well, Lake Throssell, it's a little bit hard to see the lake itself. It's about 300 square kilometres, this tenement. And if we're talking about local distances here in Western Australia, the corner of this granted tenement would take us all the way out to the lakes on the Great Eastern Highway. It's big. But low impact. We're talking about a trench network of about 110 kilometres, gravity feeding the brine into the pond system. And bores will start with a very simple number of bores to manage, 22 bores to start with, and expanding that over the mine life to 112 to sustain that production rate. The other takeaway on this slide is the dark blue area is the indicator resource in the basal aquifer, and I'll talk about the difference between superficial and basal in a minute. But the lighter blue area is the inferred resource, which doesn't make a substantial part of the scoping study. So there is more upside the more drilling we do, and the more confidence we get in the resource, we'll be able to convert that into production rate and mine life. So it's really, looking at this, it's a big bathtub. A bathtub that's 5 kilometres wide, 36 kilometres long and about 150 metres deep. In that bathtub, sands and gravels and different weathered material, but that provides the pore spaces for this water to have concentrated the minerals over many years. And through the high evaporation rate, that the water that's brought it down in that system in the Paleo Valley has concentrated that to a point where we can sustainably mine potassium fertiliser. The site layout is again very much about minimising our footprint and maximising what we have there in natural endowment, geologically and geographically. So we're proposing to put the halite ponds on the lake itself. So that's the first part of the concentration of the evaporation. Then taking them off lake into the KTMS cells, and a very standard processing for this. The processing is really a purification process and providing a 99% pure SOP product. We are out 180 kilometres east of Laverton, so we're proposing an airstrip and camp infrastructure. And this will employ about 114 people permanently for that 21 years. So as I said, it is tried and proven. There's nothing terribly new and exciting to be able to extract these minerals. It is using solar energy. We plan to also use we've got a 5 megawatt solar energy power plant in the proposal as well. And it is all tried and true method of producing sulphate of potash. Our program, or our plan at the moment, is to take it all the way through to a granular product. You can see that on this slide. That's through a final compaction process, and ultimately we'll bag it and put it into sea containers for either sale within the domestic market or export out of the container port in Fremantle. So the upside on this project, it is also about exploration and expanding the footprint. We have tenements under application which cover the entire Paleo Valley system around Lake Throssell. We have an exploration target there of another 2.6 to 9.4 million tonnes on top of that resource. And we also have another lake 35 kilometres to the south. That lake sits in the same Paleo Valley as Lake Throssell and has even a bigger footprint. So we're anticipating that will be a lookalike for Lake Throssell. They're not yet granted, and it's part of the bigger picture for Lake Throssell, but the main game is to build a sustainable project where the logistics are in our favour, and that is on the Great Central Road at Lake Throssell. So why, when we're talking at a mining conference, and my background is hard rock mining, be talking about fertiliser, which is in fact a salt, but it's a good quality salt that provides 2 of the 4 macronutrients for plant growth, potassium and sulphur. Without potassium, there would be nothing living on this earth because it's essential for life. It's in every living cell. And we as humans need 4,700 milligrams per day in our diet. So our food's food and our food's food requires potash and potassium to grow. Importantly for sulphate of potash, this is a niche part of the market. It's about 7 million tonnes per annum demand, which is more than 10 times the market size of lithium. But it's the cream on the top. When we talk about BHP and the big potash projects, they're talking about muriate. That's about 70 million tonnes per annum. But it's not great stuff. Yes, it does provide potassium, but 50% of that product is chloride, and chloride contributes to your salinity issues, and it's in fact quite poisonous for many crops. So all of these things on the right-hand side need sulphate of potash. And in arid climates like ours, where we can't always rely on the rainfall to flush it out, and we might not be wanting to put the chloride into our waterways anymore, we are going to need it more and more on broadacre crops as well. And a number of our shareholders are in fact broadacre farmers and looking to substitute their muriate with sulphate of potash to increase the sustainability of their farmland. So as I said, Lake Throssell is appearing to be a top 10 global producer. And that's the beginning of our story. Also, Q1 cost quartile producer. And we have been really conservative in our capital and operating cost estimates to make sure that we are really confident with what we're going forward with here. So there is potential that we can move further down that curve as we expand the resource base and increase our knowledge in this project. But what I've also shown here is the secondary process, because globally we do not make anywhere near enough sulphate of potash for our current demand from primary sources. It needs to come from a secondary chemical process where they purchase muriate of potash, sulphuric acid, and heat it to 800 degrees, consuming large quantities of energy to produce a manufactured sulphate of potash. By doing that, it creates an industry price floor, and that price floor is well above the cost of natural brine. So how does this all fit into what's going on globally? Well, for many, many years now, sulphate of potash has seen a very sustainable price structure where it sits about $200 a tonne over the price of muriate. But something is a change. And that change is we're growing population, reducing areas of arable land. We're depleting the nutrients in those soils. We need more and more fertiliser to produce the food that we need. In fact, 50% of the food that we consume is attributed to the use of fertilisers. So the demand for these products is going up. And we are seeing a step change in the last 6 months in both the muriate and the SOP market, to a point muriate has squeezed out that price margin. But with that price floor and the need for Mannheim production and an incentive for Mannheim to make some money on that process, we anticipate that the price for SOP is going to follow that trend with muriate and continue to grow. The other key takeaway here, given we used a very conservative now, if you look at that over the last few months, $550 a tonne, is the impact on our NPV. And it increased every 10% change in the price of SOP has $144 million impact on the project. So given we're at a mining conference and most of my colleagues are talking about metals and what's been happening over the last few years in metals, well, we know iron ore's had a pretty good run, but they've come off the cliff. Gold has been very, very steady for the last 6 months. Battery minerals, well, if you've got lithium, it's looking pretty damn fantastic. But look at agricultural commodities and the inputs to agriculture. They are all having an exceptional time in the sun. So why invest in TRIGG at this point? Well, as I said earlier, an enterprise value of $5.9 million with an outstanding project. Lake Throssell is set to become a global top 10 producer in the lowest cost quartile. There are outstanding economics with our base case of 21 years and so much more to add to that story. We are in a world-class mining jurisdiction. This is where I've spent most of my operational career. We know the landscape and we know what we're doing about it. It is Australian-made, it's a natural product and potentially certifiable for organic use. We have significant exploration upside and it is very much about global megatrends. The world population is growing. We need to feed more and more people from less and less arable land. And in 2 years, we have made a greenfields discovery. It is of the scale and size to justify a scoping study. That has been completed and we're already embarking on the pre-feasibility study. So that is why I'm excited to be here. As a mining engineer, exploration is about building and finding something that we are going to build. And I'm very confident that that's going to happen at TRIGG Mining. Thank you.